What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the BizDad podcast. I am excited to talk to James Bates today. If you can, James, please tell us a little bit about who you are, tell us about your family, and then tell us about your business.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I love the concept. So I'm born and raised in a town called Modesto, California, which is Central Valley of California. So a little different than the rest of California in that it's very agricultural and rural, but then you're also very close to a lot of outdoors, a lot of the Bay Area, Silicon Valley. You got a little bit of everything in a couple hours. Yeah, grew up as a pastor's kid and here in Modesto, and we can touch on any of these things later if you want. My dad is the 19th to 20 children. Amazing backstory with him. My parents still married, still live here in town. Actually just moved out of the house that they were in for almost 40 years just last year. So still doing well. And yeah, I'm a dad and I love being a dad. I have one son. He's 14 years old. His name's Callan. And then my sweetheart gentleman, who has just been such an amazing helpmate and partner with me in the last 5 years, has two amazing, wonderful boys, Christian, who's 15, and Mateo, who's 8. And it's awesome being in their lives and watching these young men grow up and navigate through life at all the various stages and ages. It's been really cool. And happened to own a business. I was blessed I had a great free high school and high school sports career in baseball. I'm an outdoor guy. Love being outdoors, love sports.
That's great to hear. So what was it like growing up with your dad, your family? Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah. So my dad was a pastor of a local church. So I have two older brothers who are 9 and 11 years older than I am. And they grew up as traditional pastor's kids. Church, dad being a pastor. And the year before I was born, my dad resigned from being a pastor. He was pastor of a real small church when he started, and he grew that to overthrow, I say he, but God and just running the church. But he was always a neighborhood guy. He would go out, meet people, meet them where they're at, say, hey, we got this facility in your neighborhood. How can we be a blessing to the community we're in? But the church just kept saying, they got to be saved first before they can come in. Again, because Jesus didn't really work like that.
Yes.
Well, I guess to sum it up, when he resigned, he ended up writing a book, and the title says it all, and the title is Legalism or Love. And I grew up as an evangelist kid. So I wasn't like I had a home church. I've seen every kind of church, denomination, background that you can imagine. It was actually a really cool experience. I loved it. One very pivotal moment in my life is, I'll never forget, I was 6 years old and another minister was in town and he was having dinner with my parents. And at the end, we all got up and said, hey, let's all just pray. And as he's praying, he put his hand on me. He said, I feel like James is being called, that he's going to be a pastor. And when he left, I was crying. I said, I don't want to be a pastor. Because you're right. My dad was fantastic. He would pitch tennis balls to me for hours in the front yard, spend time, but a pastor's life is never on. And I get calls to the hospital, weddings, funerals, counseling. My dad taught me a lot about him, my mom. My mom was just an amazing helpmate to my dad. They were just such an amazing couple. And he said, hey, James, sometimes people are going to come to the house and they're going to come in my office and I'm going to be talking with them and there will be for counseling. Just so you know, you never say that they came here, and I'm never going to tell you what we talked about. And it really has helped me as an adult in life about just not gossiping, having trust and confidentiality. But the pivotal moment for me was my dad, who's a beast of a man. His hand is 1.5 times bigger than mine. Literally, NFL players, his hand will engulf their hand. And he put his big old bear paw on my back as I was crying. He said, James, don't ever feel pressured to do something you're not supposed to do. And he said, being a pastor is a calling from God. And if that's what you're supposed to do, you'll know it. And that was so incredibly free for me to think, wow, I can just be present where I'm at and not feel pressure to be what other people think I need to be.
The kind of advice can go a long ways, because I've had multiple people try to tell me the same thing, honestly. And it's one of those that if it's not God telling me to do it, then I'm not out here hunting for a prophetic word, right? Better keep doing what I'm doing and keep asking God to tell me where I need to go. And as long as he hasn't told me to change my path, then I'm going to keep on going, assuming I'm in the right spot. And that is a bit freeing for sure in knowing that and not feeling that pressure. When your dad left and he started doing what he was doing, was there still a lot of travel involved with that? Was there a lot, like, how much did you get to see behind the scenes on what he was doing? He wasn't pastoring an actual traditional church. What did that look like?
Yeah, that was cool. My dad was very involved. I saw a ton of stuff from recording and making tapes and traveling all over. He went to even Korea. He was speaking, preaching all over. So there were times that he was gone. Obviously, I was at school, sports heavily. But when he was home, he was present. I think the hardest part of being a pastor's kid was being in public. If we went to a restaurant, my dad talked to everybody but us, because hey, Pastor Bates, Reverend Bates, this, could you pray for me? And they would talk to him. That, I'm really intentional when I'm out with my son, well known in the community and areas that people come up, say to keep it really brief, because I remember that experience, and it rubbed me the wrong way many times to, like, man, I want to just to breakfast with my dad. I've tried to figure out,
And balance is always a word that I hate using, but I've tried to figure out that balance, even when we're like, hey, we're going to take the week off. And it's always a quote unquote take the week off, right? Because when you're running a business, until everything is in its place and you're basically on a board, like, there's always things that need to be done when you're operating a business. But I'll get random phone calls while we're out at a theme park or something like that. And it's okay, let me take this phone call, let me fix this problem. And it's okay. I don't want them to always think that the phone comes first, but at the same point, it's the phone, it's answering those phone calls that help pay the bills and bring us to this theme park. So it's such a hard dilemma in my brain sometimes to figure out what is the right answer, what's the wrong answer. And I'm certainly not good at it yet. I'm still trying to figure all that out.
Yeah. And I love what you said, because I have a tough time with the word balance. We can't be perfectly in balance. As entrepreneurs and those things, we stretch and we give a lot. I heard the analogy of a rubber band, right? So you have so much capacity, and there's times in your business is going to stretch that rubber band. And hopefully you have good mentors and feedback systems in your life that you don't break the rubber band. And so it's never like perfectly in balance, like sitting like a round rubber band. I'm going to stretch and I'm going to pull, but I also am cognizant of, hey, that has to retract at some point, and I need to stretch the rubber band this. And so it's that constant flex. And that's what I do with my son. I am Taylor Doolittle, originally from North Carolina, but for the past 12 years have made the Twin Cities of Minnesota my home, as this is where my wife is from. And a common known thing is Minnesotans will go out, grab a spouse, and bring them back to Minnesota, called the Minnesota Boomerang. That's how they convince people to come to the cold weather. I've been married for 10 years to my beautiful wife, Sarah. I met down in North Carolina at Callan. And we have two beautiful little daughters. I am a girl dad and absolutely friend. I have almost 3-year-old Aurora, Rory, and then 4-month-old Olive, aka Liz, aka Livy. So Rory and Liv. And we're just absolutely having a blast. What else? We love to be outside. We love to adventure. We love to get our girls outside and just try to spend as much time together as we can, all together as a family. I run a residential real estate team out of a local RE here in the Twin Cities. I started in 2017 with my brother-in-law and stored 6 years. So I have 15 people on the team and help people buy and sell and invest in residential real estate, as well as some commercial stuff as well. Also have a small investment portfolio. It is pretty common for those that are fortunate enough to be in GoBundance. That's how I met Adam. What else? What am I missing? We got your wife, we got your kids, their age, and your business. I think you've covered all the steps on that one. So I'm sure we'll go into a little bit more depth on some of that stuff. But before we go into too much depth there, let me rewind your track a little bit. I've got here that you're 34 years old. Tell me what it was like growing up when you were 4 years old. Tell me about your dad. Tell me about your mom, your family, what kind of upbringing you had coming around.
Sure.
Something that I think is so cool about becoming a parent is it just gives you so much perspective on your own childhood. And in my case, just have nothing but just absolute gratitude and thankfulness. Just had such a blessing of a family growing up. Not to say that we were perfect, but I'm one of 3 kids. We're each 2 years apart. Great planning by my parents. I'm 34, my brother's 36, and my sister's 32. And my dad's from Texas. My mom's from Pennsylvania originally. Both their families, or my mom's family made it to North Carolina. My dad got transferred there for work, and they dated for 8 months, and then they got married, and then had my brother. So my dad was a business guy. He was one of 4, and this is an example of one of the things that, like, me becoming an adult, becoming a parent, just understanding my dad and hearing his story has just made me so thankful. In that, one of 4 boys growing up in rural Texas. His mom and dad split at a really young age. My dad, I think, went to 7 or 8 high schools because his dad was always traveling around, going to city for that next job. And my dad was just finally, can't do this anymore. He moved out on his own when he was like 15 into his older brother's house, but he had just gotten married and his wife was having none of that. So he was basically living in rented a room from a grandma when he was like 15 and just made his way from there. And so my mom is one of 7. And when my dad met my mom's family and saw how her dad parented supportive kid in such a cool way, that's how my dad learned how to be a great dad. I just have a lot of respect for people who come from a past not seeing something modeled really well in really any realm, turns around and as an adult learns how to become really good at a thing and kind of defies the odds and becomes a great dad. So it's just super fortunate for that. That's awesome. Yeah. What kind of business was your dad in? And did you have any involvement in the business he did? What was your perspective watching him do what he was doing? So, well, when you're growing up, you just think, oh, all parents do this, right? So I didn't have really great insight when I was in it, but my dad was in sales. So I feel like he was of one of the last generations that could really, in my mind, live the American dream. And what I mean by that is he didn't graduate from college. I think went to technical college for a year, but left and started stocking vending machines, and then was the route manager, and then was the sales manager, and then was the region manager. And so he started off stocking Dr. Pepper machines, and then years later worked himself up to be a local vice president of Coca-Cola in just the area that we were in. So just awesome sales guy, where it was normal for me growing up for, oh, my dad needs to go entertain customers, so we get to go to the Charlotte Hornets game. Or we get to go to the Panthers game, which was so cool for me to bring in friends who didn't come from families where, like, hey, that was the norm to go to an NBA game. We were able to invite a friend sometimes and things like that. My dad is just very charming. He's not charismatic in the way that I'd like. He doesn't need to be front and center of attention, but he can talk to anybody, makes everyone feel welcome. And is always just quick to joke, like quick to make people laugh, very witty, so many puns, just really good with people. My mom is as well. So them together, we were the house that was the host house. So all the friends go over to the Doolittles, and my dad, his passion was cooking. So chef, right? So Chef Don, I'm going to have things down. So my dad would cook a big meal, everyone come over and hang out. So again, when you're in it, it just feels normal. But getting further down the road and stepping into parenthood, you just realize how much effort that was, how much hustle that was. And my dad was, what I hear is a common story of, hey, didn't have the most favorable upbringing, so worked his tail off to provide for his family all of the things that he didn't have. I'm wondering, did he talk to you at all, like when you learned about his upbringing? Was that more at an older age, or did you know about that when you were still going through elementary, junior high, anything like that? It's still tough. My dad's a hard shell to crack. He doesn't open up a ton about it, and I can respect that, because I think a lot of it comes from him. This is something that I've learned in the last year or two, is like he wanted to protect our image of our grandparents. He wanted to protect our image of his family, while at the same time not wanting to bring maybe some of that messy past into into us kids as, hey, this is an option, or this is what the history of our family looks like. So I think some of it comes from probably wanting to protect us, but then also his personality. Anytime we have a trip planned to go home to North Carolina to visit, my dad's so pumped, so excited, and quality time together is us just like sitting on the couch, have the Dallas Cowboys on. Don't need to say a word to each other, but just because we're together and hanging, it like is great. So our relationship has never been like the deep philosophical conversations. He's one of 4 boys, and they were absolutely nuts. And he didn't have that kind of relationship with his dad. So tell me about your family and then and your business stuff.
I've got a beautiful wife, 2 young children, a 4-year-old daughter, 2-year-old son. They're both just fiery, fun, curious, funny, stubborn, hard-headed, all of the things you want all of your kids to be. Bedtime every night is a hostage negotiation. Dinner time is a battle. But I'm trying to help raise hard-headed, stubborn kids. Like, it's hard to parent. But I told my wife, like, the world is not just going to open these beautiful gold doors and say, here you go, king kids, here's whatever you want on a gold platter. Like, the world's going to kick you in the teeth. It's going to knock you down. It's going to beat you up. And I think the stubborn ones find a way to pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and keep moving forward. In terms of businesses, I run and oversee a family office out of Austin, Texas. One of the businesses we own is the 8th largest residential real estate brokerage in the United States. And then from that have parlayed that into multiple businesses. Today, I oversee the entire family office, get to work with some incredibly talented people who run the portfolio companies that we own. And then as a byproduct of my role in the family office, I get to lead this incredible organization called GoBundance as the CEO, and GoBundance Champions, which is a tribe, I tell people, that's raised me. And my parents, again, they raised me, they did the hard work, but these guys brought me in and showed me all these other new ways to think about money and life and goal. And it's just opened my eyes to a whole different perspective. And so I'm fortunate to be able to run and oversee those, have some companies I own on the side. Grateful to have a cool team that's really smart, really talented, excited about what we're trying to accomplish. And all of it for me, Adam, ties back to that service. So whether it's like trying to find service-based businesses or whether it's trying to launch group coaching and deliver services through that, like for me, it's all about serving people. And if I can continue to just serve and make the world a better place, I can die pretty happy. I'm really fortunate, man. I've been able along the journey of my life to meet some really cool people. Started off when I was younger, meeting cool people at my grandparents' place down in Jupiter, Florida, people that own Michael's Pipeline, which has got to be one of the largest roadwork pipeline companies in the world, if not the largest. And just being surrounded by people that thought a little bit differently. Both my parents are amazing, down to earth, incredible humans, but they chose the normal route that most people choose, this middle class, amazing people, same jobs for 40 plus years. Dad actually just retired 2 weeks ago from the same job he's had since graduated from college.
Nice. Congrats, Dad.
And it's amazing, man. Like, it's incredible, the commitment and dedication that they had. And I've been lucky along this journey to be surrounded by cool people. But most importantly, I'm fortunate that my parents instilled in me this curiosity. And I think that the curiosity is what has allowed me to find the way or make the way to achieving whatever I've set out to achieve. I think oftentimes we end in sort of judgment, which is solve problem, like boom, judgment, door closed. But by being in curiosity, it's allowed me to open some really cool doors and learn new perspectives that I didn't know existed.
I'm a husband to my beautiful bride, Amy, and father to 9-year-old Layla, 9-year-old daughter, and my 6-year-old son, Jackson. And just a little bit of my background stuff. I grew up in most of my childhood, one of 5 kids in the Northeast of rural Missouri. And so I was in the middle of a couple of brothers, a couple of younger sisters, and I enlisted for the Navy right out of high school. And I left, as I mentioned earlier, I was a cryptologist. I did 1 tour at sea and got selected for a commissioning program, went back to the University of Missouri, go Tigers. And after that's where I actually met my wife, Amy, is while we were in college there together. And she was in the RGC program and stuff. I got commissioned in late 2007 and moved out to Hawaii, and she moved out there probably 6-7 months later when she got commissioned and got orders as well. And I was riding subs. She was on a ship and stuff. And we got married during that time in Hawaii. We didn't see a whole lot of each other it while we were in Hawaii, as well as our next tour. We moved to San Diego after getting married. We were both on ships. So this first probably 4 years or so of being married, and we were both going to sea quite a bit, some back-to-back deployments. So there was a lot of time apart. And we eventually did a short tour in San Diego. I was a Third Fleet staff and Admiral staff. And towards the middle of that, or latter half, Amy went to the reserves as we had our first daughter, Melella, in 2014. And I started that, 2014. And so after we left San Diego, we had to do some quick public math there real quick. And we moved to Colorado. I was at the aerospace data facility out in Colorado. That's where our son Jackson was born. And then my final tour in the Navy, we had the opportunity to go to England. I was a U.S. Cybercom exchange officer to the United Kingdom. And so that's where I spent my final 3 years in the Navy, and just retired last October, so just a year ago this month. And we ended up deciding to move back here to the Kansas City area. I say back to the Midwest, if you will, about 3 hours from like where I grew up. But a lot of family stuff drove that. Lived in Hawaii and San Diego and things. We thought we'd maybe go to a coast. Colorado was beautiful and sunny and stuff as well. But the kids didn't get to spend a lot of time around. Like I have a large extended family and pretty close in many ways. And they didn't get to see a lot of them. And so that drove some decisions to be back around the Midwest, be close to their grandparents and cousins and things of that nature. So that's what brought us to this area for the time being. And I've been in real estate, and my real estate journey has spread throughout my military career. That's probably how it got started. And as I invested in other stuff, I got a lot more serious and intentional about it a couple of years ago as I was looking at my transition out of the military on the horizon. And, I didn't want a 9-to-5 for some very specific reasons. And it drove me to be a little bit more systematic instead of opportunistic in my real estate journey. And what I'm doing now, primarily my focus inside real estate right now, is helping educate and provide opportunity to investors, passive investors, to the acquisition of multifamily and other commercial real estate and stuff, so that they can focus on the things that are important in their life, whether that's their W-2 or travel or the family or whatever. So I'm just really enjoying doing that, as well as being more present and available as a father as I work through this transition. So where I am today.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about your life growing up, about your parents, what it was like growing up as a kid.
Yeah, looking back, like we have so many great memories, and I think our in-laws and stuff appreciate us sharing some of that. And shortly after I was born, the family moved to Colorado for about 7 years. And my father went to college out there during the time. He managed a large horse and cattle ranch and stuff. So I had two older brothers. One was about 4 years older than me. The other one was about 2 years older than me. And then my sisters are similar, 2 to 3 years younger and 4 to 5 years younger. So fairly evenly spread out. And I think that we came from a pretty humble background and stuff. I have memories times of going to pick up cans to buy school supplies and stuff for my oldest brother and stuff. So there's certainly some of those in my memories, but we never went without. My parents, my mom was a teacher for most all my childhood, and still this until recently when he retired. And my father was in ranching and farming. He also worked in school systems and stuff as well. And so we were out in Colorado about 7 years, moved back to Missouri, where a lot of our family was central there. Father, like I said, worked on cattle farms and things of that nature. And we're a pretty close family. I have my mom's side of the family has 10 brothers and sisters. And so a lot of first cousins, a lot of family around, and really a big support system in many ways. In 2006, I guess it was probably when I was about 13 years old. And my family started a business, horse training, and we had a tack shop, and we raised a lot of horses and things. I had a little bit of a family business, spent a lot of time together there. And so as time went over, I come from those humble beginnings, even on the farm and stuff, never had a lot and over abundance and stuff. But I think as we look back, the memories that we created and stuff were probably more valuable than a lot of the tangible aspects. But so yeah, brothers, we were all the siblings were fairly close. We had our sibling differences, if you will. We went to
5 guys with sibling differences, another chance.
Yes. Yeah, I haven't met any other families like that and stuff yet, but yeah, we're close.
I'm Stephen Heptig. I am currently one of the co-founders of the Kinetic Man. My W-2 is as a United 777 pilot here on the East Coast. I live in Philadelphia. Most importantly, I'm married to Christine since 2018, and we've got 2 kids. I've got a 3-year-old boy named Mason, and I've got a 3-month-old girl named Marigold, who we call Goldie. How long have you been married? 2018, so do public math, 5 years. I want to rewind a little bit, and feel free to filter as you need to. I want to rewind to your upbringing, where you came from. So if you can't tell me a little bit about like your dad, what it was like growing up with your dad around or not around, whatever the case may be, and let's dig into that a little bit. Yeah, I grew up in Houston, so I am the oldest of 3 kids. I have 1 younger brother and then a younger sister. Parents are still married. They honestly, I would say I lived a pretty average suburban Texas kid life outside of Houston. Our parents are together. We lived in a nice neighborhood. Looking back, I think this is true for everyone, right? You think your life is normal, and then you get to be an adult and you're like, that wasn't normal. But so looking back, the normal things were went to public school, did soccer, all the kind of regular kid stuff growing up. Some of the abnormal stuff was we had my grandparents ended up living with us. So they couldn't live on their own anymore. It was my mom's parents. So we built an apartment for them above our garage, and they lived with us. So we were a multi-generational family for quite some time, which is funny because that's so abnormal today. And I didn't even really think of that until I was an adult. And then my dad, he was an architect, which means he worked really hard. Quintessential boomer generation, hardworking professional, right? So he went to work early in the morning, had a long commute down to the other side of Houston. He worked long hours. He stayed late, came home, was very involved with baseball games and yelling at the umpire from the backstop and all those kinds of things. But he worked long hours. And then for a period, he actually did work at home. He left his job, his W-2 job, worked for himself for a while. I honestly don't even remember how many years it was, but call it 4 or 5 years. And he had an office in the back of the garage. And I remember, it's funny now, you and I actually, before we got on this call, we were just talking about how difficult it can be working from home. It's a double-edged sword, right? There's a bunch of good stuff, but difficulty as well. And so it's funny, I now understand this, right? Like when he had a deadline coming up, he worked all day long, every day, 5 days a week. But when he had a deadline coming up, like he would eat dinner and then go back to his office and work until probably 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And now I understand, that's because he actually got things accomplished at that point in time. It's so hard to get things accomplished when the family's awake and bugging you all day. Yeah. So that was my family upbringing. Was we were an intact family, got kids, mom and dad involved, all the sports, that kind of thing. But dad was definitely a hard working professional that spent a lot of time focused on the W-2 and providing. Okay. So what did your mom do for a living? Or she stayed home? She was staying home. She worked prior to kids. She was like a computer scientist, which is pretty abnormal in those days, but stayed at home when she had kids. And then once we got into high school, she did a few things for local businesses, like some executive secretary type of stuff. But generally speaking, she was stay at home. Awesome. Yeah. My mom generally was stay at home, but she obviously when the times were tough, then she would go get a job or two. But how is it that a kid that has an architect for a dad and a stay-at-home mom / computer scientist decides, I'm going to join the Air Force and go to the Air Force Academy? How did that thought process? I am the black sheep of both my family and the Air Force. My dad was an architect and a very good one at that. My mom did some computer science stuff growing up. My brother's a structural engineer. And my sister married a nuclear robotics type of scientist. Oh, wow. I'm the dumb one of the family. Okay. But we went on a few trips around the United States when I was younger. And one of those trips went up to Washington State. And the islands off of the coast of Washington State, you can get there 2 ways, ferry or airplane. And so I got to go fly in a Cessna 172 when I was pretty young, probably, I guess it would have been like 13 or 14. And that made an imprint in my life. So that was like one of those moments that pointed me towards aviation for the rest of my life. And then we visited both the Air Force Academy and the Naval Academy on some of these road trips that we would take. My family would hop in the car and take road trips. So I just combined those 2 things together. So I was headed towards either, and my parents had we didn't have a lot of money conversations, but one of the money conversations that we did have that I thought was helpful was them telling me, like, there is not money for you to go to college from us, right? Like, it is on you. Like, you need to go to college. We'll help you if we can, but generally speaking, it's on you. So
you take those three forces and combine them together, aviation, military, and need a way to pay through college, the service academies become a really tempting option.
Nate Fisher, and I'm married, been married for 20 years in 2024, got 3 children, got an 17-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 12-year-old, Blake, Lily, and Marshall. Been married to my wife, Kate, again for 20 years. Our 20th anniversary is coming up here. I live in Central Ohio, we're based out of Central Ohio. My company is Peak 10 Group. We are multifamily owner-operators, investors, a developer. And so I'm the founder and owner there. We're pretty small and we invest in a lot of other people's deals. So grew up here in Central Ohio. And I like to say, I did. I grew up in a multifamily family. Okay. So what does that mean? That means that my mom and dad, when I was a little kid, I was born with 1 foot in the 60s. So I'm 54. And I grew up doing kind of what many of us are doing today, right? My folks were doing the Burr method when I was a little kid. My folks grew up on a farm and they came to Columbus, to the big city, to go to Ohio State. And they actually lived in a trailer park when they bought their first double. And so I grew up around all this stuff, and we were true owner operators. And so they were buying and living in living in apartments and fixing them up. And so my childhood was spent around flips, if you will, and really long-term holds. So some of the stuff, one of the first doubles I actually still own today and just sold it to my kids, or actually just sold it to my kids. We call that double the training wheels. And when I was 4 and 5, I remember riding around doing work orders. And when I was 7 and 8, I was on the lawn crew. And when I was 15, I was doing roofs, right? I went to Ohio State knowing I always wanted to be in real estate. I just didn't know where I'd fit. And so I actually got a degree from Ohio State in real estate. And then didn't know if I wanted to work for the family, went out and worked for another big company. And so, yeah.
I don't remember hearing that you were an Ohio State grad, so I may have to end the conversation now and just call it a day. Maybe we did talk about that. I don't remember, but I may have to black it out of my head. But man, oh man.
My dad did take a W-2 job for a little while there to fund the real estate world. And he played this dirty trick on my sister and I, and actually took a job in Michigan. So I was born in Michigan. Oh my God.
Nice.
My sister and I think he did that on purpose, but moved back to Central Ohio in the early 70s.
I think you should have stayed. That's just me. That's just me. But no, awesome. 20 years, first off, congratulations on that. That's, especially in today's day and age, is a massive milestone, like the amount of divorces we see and people that just can't seem to figure out what the word commitment means. But well done on 20 years. But I want to go in just because I know there's a lot to dig in on that. But going back to your childhood and kind of what it was like growing up with your mom and dad doing what they were doing, what you saw, what your thought process was behind it. Let's just rewind and go, okay, if you were to look at it from looking at it now, say, okay, growing up under this multifamily family, like what did that actually look like? What did it feel like?
It was challenging. We all worked in the business and we all did our part. And so it was pretty crazy because back in the day, I remember our home phone was on all the signs, right? So the home phone would ring and it was tenants calling to rent apartments. My mom was the bookkeeper. My brother was the lawn crew. He's 7 years older than me. And we just did it all. And I guess they built an incredible engine. Okay. And I learned a ton from my mother and father and my brother too, because my brother worked his whole life in the family business, again, being 7 years older. And so I feel like the hard work ethic was instilled in me. And that's what I hope to instill in my children is they gave me, I love the work I do. And the work ethic was instilled in me from a very young age. We did whatever we needed to do. Everybody did a little bit of everything on the properties. And you learn. I was never a strong maintenance guy, right? But I know enough from osmosis to know when there's bad maintenance or good maintenance, right? You just learned what was going on. And yeah, strategies are a little bit different today, but you just learn the basics being around it all the time.
What was it like going to school every day, right? Were you homeschooled or did you go to a regular school?
No, I went to a regular public school.
Okay. What was that like going to public school and be like, oh yeah, it's 4th grade. It's time to go home and work. What was that kind of like? How did those conversations at the playground or at the cafeteria go? What was that looking back?
I didn't really know any different. I wouldn't say that it was until I was a little bit older when the portfolio started growing that I maybe felt like we we were having some success. We were very modest the whole time. And the portfolio grew to 1,200 units, which is a good size scattered site portfolio. And
For sure.
honestly, my parents were always very modest. And maybe that's just being children of Depression era parents. They are. And so we always lived a pretty modest lifestyle. I didn't feel, it wasn't until maybe some other kids were like, oh, that guy's the landlord. They own all those properties. Like, I didn't really realize, I didn't know any different. I just felt like I was being a normal kid. I learned to be an entrepreneur very early. That's just ingrained in me. And I think I inherited that from my mother and father. They were very entrepreneurial. They lived through the interest rates of 1981 and 82, right? I was 12 and 13. I didn't really comprehend what was going on, but they made it through that and they had to grind. And I want to get to a point later about where we are in the market today and what I said to my mom I want to get to that about the market today versus what they went through. They went through some of the stuff we're going through today. And so they can relate to some of the challenges of today because they went through it and they understand. But I had the morning paper route on my street. I had the evening paper route on my street. I would always come up with these crazy ideas. Oh, I can get this little widget and buy it and I can resell it. So I always had these little entrepreneurial things that I was trying to do. And I had to get that from my parents.
My name is Paul Melella. Historically, I have a martial art background. My first line of businesses are martial arts schools, a small chain of them up in New York. I currently live in Charleston, South Carolina right now. Been here for almost 3 years. I was always a little dude growing up. I was bullied and I wasn't really naturally athletic back then. Probably I was an extremely easy target, short, not really that confident. And I had this kid named Tommy Gonzalez that picked on me, beat me up every day, did some horrific things. But then eventually my parents got fed up and put me in martial arts for me to develop a little self-confidence, self-esteem, learn how to defend myself. Then I trained.
So you're the oldest of 5. What was it like growing up where you were? And tell us about your dad and what that was like.
My dad's great. My dad's a good man, hard worker. Financially, he struggled, and he would admit he defined success as family. That's the number one way he defined success. My dad worked real hard. He went the path of the blue-collar electrician, union worker. He had many opportunities to open up his own businesses. His belief was, if I open up my own business, I won't be here for you kids. That was his belief. And then work real hard, probably paycheck to paycheck. I don't know how they did it in the 80s with 5 children. He was married at 20, had me at 22. My mom and him were high school sweethearts. You know what I mean? They moved out of Yonkers, New York to Putnam, Westchester County, which was more like the suburbs from where they were raised. And he just went the blue collar route. And money did not come easily and effortlessly. Our vacations were jumping in my mom's white Caravan and driving to Orlando, Florida for us to compete in the junior nationals. I had no comparison of what that was like. We eat pasta and meatballs every day. I used to think because you're Italian, that's what you do, but it wasn't this weird. I mean, I had no money. Like, what are they actually going to feed me? Feed pasta, meatballs. This is what Italians do. But it's because they didn't have the money to feed everybody. We had a roof over our head. If I wasn't training in Taekwondo, I was outside, out and about, riding my bikes, building tree forts, ripping on my quad, or playing manhunt. It was a great childhood. Growing up in the 80s and early 90s, I graduated high school. It was great. No cell phones, hardly not that many video games. I remember when Atari came out. I remember Atari playing the Atari. We were outside all day till my dad gave a whistle. I ran back home, would eat, go train, come back at night, play manhunt in the summertime. But money didn't come easily and effortlessly to my family. I had a really awkward relationship around my money blueprint. A really awkward belief about being a business owner. As much as that was my dad's paradigm, and I don't poo-poo on it, that's what he just thought. I actually used that as leverage. I wanted to prove that I can be an entrepreneur, be fit, make a good living with integrity, not screw anyone over. My dad would still, to this day, he would go do work at your house, pay for all the material. Melella, how much money do I owe you? He'd be like, just give me $200. Meanwhile, costing them $300 for the material. Follow me? She would never charge anyone every money. He had this fear of just being a good guy. I'm like, Dad, you got to charge. You have value. You gotta be worthy. And he would never do it.
Where do you think your dad got? So your grandpa, I want to go back one more layer, like your dad's dad. What kind of life did your dad live growing up that may have started him on that path?
My dad's actually the second out of four. My grandfather died at 54 years old, maybe 53. He was super young. And he was not a blue collar guy. My dad's really handy. He could tell you, I don't own a tool. I don't own a tool. I wish I tried as a kid. Like, it's just my generation. You know what I mean? Literally, my wife is more handy than I. People will try. I always have this belief I'm not a man, so I can't manually do. No, Frank Sinatra didn't move pianos, man. You know what I mean? I'm good at one or two things. I stink at everything else. But the one or two things I'm good at, I believe I'm the best in the world at. I don't need to do all of those stuff. I got a guy. How about that? I make enough money to have a guy.
Yeah.
Right? My dad's dad, my grandfather, just before he died, he was going to be one of the presidents or vice presidents of the Macy's Union. He was in the corporate sales for Macy's. He made enough money, 4 kids. My dad's oldest brother went to college, military. His younger brother went to Cornell. Guy's in bank, retired banking, like he's loaded. And then his sister, my aunt, went also, I think she went to NY. So they're all educated. He's the only one that went blue collar route. My grandfather told him, if you're going to do that, you're going to be an electrician, you got to get into the union. My grandfather was in the Macy's Union. I guess he always had union is safe route. That was their belief. Growing up, my dad was a Democrat. He's not anymore. What do I do? I'm like, hey son, you're a business owner. You have to choose the right thing. Here's what I tell my kids. You know what? We get blue collar grit with white collar thinking.
Yeah.
That's what I teach my kids.
I have 3 kids. Dummer, who's 18 years old in college, freshman at Lehigh in Pennsylvania, learning finance. I texted him the other day to see how he was doing. And he tells me, for once, I actually like the stuff that I'm learning. I'm not just memorizing for the sake of memorizing. No kidding. I have another son who's a sophomore in high school, Neil, and then a daughter who's 10 years old in 5th grade. They keep busy. I own a company called AG Management Consulting, morphed into a consulting business from a prior business that I sold to private equity and some real estate experience I had on the side. I fell into something else, which is pretty cool.
That's awesome. I want to rewind a little bit and go to the genesis. So where you stand, like growing up. What was it like growing up for you? Tell us a little bit like your parents and what it was like for you growing up.
My parents came over from India. My father came over in the mid 60s. I had a full scholarship at Rhode Island University to do a PhD in chemistry. Wasn't married at the time. And he came over and he was studying. My father had 4 brothers and 3 sisters. One of the brothers was here in the U.S. in Poughkeepsie, New York area. So he went to Rhode Island University and he was doing his PhD. After a couple of years, he realized, doing my PhD while all these guys are working out here. Every time he would try to go for a job, they would tell him he's overqualified. So nobody's hiring him, and he's banging his head against the wall. What is this? Like, I'm overqualified. Nobody wants to hire me. Because they're all worried that he's going to leave. So he was having such a hard time. He got frustrated. He okay, I'm gonna stop doing my PhD. So he ended up leaving, and he had a master's, which he already had a master's. So he had a double master's. And then he went to India, got married, and brought my mom back. We started a family, and then
Right. I've always been curious on, you said in the late 60s, what was it like for him growing up in India? He decided to embed him for school. Was that a normal thing for folks? What is the book for him?
Yeah, so he knows the bigger opportunities are going to be over here in America, educationally and also occupationally. So the larger universities, the bigger opportunities are here in the States. So he applied to different PhD programs. He knew it was going to be a better life than what he had and could have in India and raising us there. Honestly, it comes out of opportunity. A lot of my friends will say, oh, Indian people are so smart. They come over and they're so smart. But the reality is, if you look at it from a statistic standpoint, only the ones that got to a certain point of level of knowledge and a level of intelligence came over. What you're looking at is the people who could do it and who did come over because they were able to achieve certain things.
Yeah. The Ottomans, the second most populous country in the world, we have a very small percentage of them that come over here to be the guest. again, our statistical variation is going to be a little bit different than what you're going to see across the board for that. What was it like for you then growing up? Immigrant parents coming here, what did they do for a living? What was it like for you growing up?
My father was an ink chemist. You look at a shampoo bottle. The shampoo bottle has ink all over it, but that ink is specially formulated so it doesn't wash off, right? The person who has to formulate that stuff is somebody like my father. So he will look at the industry and say, this chemical needs to be heat resistant, waterproof, shiny, certain pigments and things like that. So he worked for companies. BASF was a large company that he worked for. Other companies that he worked for. These are some international companies that he would work in a laboratory and he would formulate different ink compounds, whatever requirements that the compound needed. My mother was a stay-at-home mom in the beginning, but later she wanted to work too. But she would just get jobs in the very beginning with, let's say, a department store. And at the very end, she was working as an accounts receivable department at an aeronautical firm. She was doing that and raising us. At a certain age, I would come home from school and had my own chores to do while my mom was at work.
Yeah, I definitely recall doing that myself rather often. That she's gone doing 2 or 3 jobs. Mom was probably a job or 2, and then, hey, yes, you're on set. We're doing homework, and then
And then my father took a second job. He was selling these vacuum cleaners called Electrolux. He went door to door selling these vacuums. He was doing that to make additional income. But if you think about it, you're like, somebody works full time. They're finished at 5 o'clock. Then they come home and do that. They're literally going door to door in a neighborhood, walk around with a vacuum cleaner, going in and saying, let me show you how good this vacuum is. Let me vacuum your carpet for you. So he must have done that so many times and you learn something from it. And now with me, I look back on it. That took some cojones to be able to sit there day after day, going out there trying to do it as a side hustle.
For sure. And it also teaches you a lot, I would imagine, about work ethic and what it is to drive them to sell and to do things. Like you got to witness what it was to kind of push through that, right? Did he do that because it wasn't like a lot of money and this type of stuff? Or was it just because he felt like he just needed to keep on working? Or how did that thing about
There was a couple things that were going on. My father and his brother had invested in a condo in Florida. It didn't turn out to be what it was supposed to be. So they were losing money. My father decided to take a second job just so he can recoup some of the losses that he was getting. So their personal experience from real estate was very bad. They hated the idea of real estate after that. But I think that's why he did that for a certain number of years. I remember my father would come home and be working on the house. He'd be home at 5 o'clock while my mom's making dinner. He's either taking wallpaper down or trying to put something up. He was a handy guy. He didn't know how to do some things, but he would learn. He literally would learn everything from different people or reading. We didn't have the internet, and they were constantly doing things to the house. He was also an avid tennis player, so he'd play tennis constantly if he could get an opportunity. My father had no interest in eating. He would be like, okay, if I have to eat to survive, I will, but I want to go play. He was just a guy who would love to play. Like, any sport, everywhere, he would just be there for it. My brother and I love to play sports, so it's probably from that. So I think coming from India, my parents were very fiscally minded because you don't have a lot of money, right? You know that I have to take care of the money that I make. So my parents would literally every weekend write down like their expenses. They would write down their income. They had a budget of what they could spend. I got a sense of budgets and things like that in my mind. And that's what I've instilled on my kids, to always to look at your numbers and know what you have before you go to spend. And the philosophy of telling them that you don't charge it on the credit card unless you already have that much in the bank account. And at the end of the month, pay off the credit card. There's no revolving. You don't let it roll over. I remember that was very big for my parents, making sure they're taking care of their financial obligations and setting aside funds.
In a nutshell, I'm Philadelphia based. I live out in suburbs. I'm married to 2 beautiful girls. I run a couple real estate companies. One is a value-add multifamily fund. So we buy kind of distressed apartment buildings between 10 and 50 units, renovate them, stabilize them at some higher rents, refinance and hold on to them. And then also do private lending. So we have like hard money loans to a lot of borrowers and friends from my networks, how we're starting. And so we lend money to fix flippers throughout the kind of this region here, this Philadelphia region. The foundation of that was to provide investors with 2 real estate options that are cash flowing, but very different. And love both those industries. And I always looked up to my investors who are in both. I was like, that's really smart to have both those types of asset classes. And that's me in a nutshell. Like I said, I'm a pilot. That's definitely a big passion of mine. Flying around, going on little day trips, taking the family around, going over to the beach, going up to New England. And also love playing tennis, golf, trying to stay active, take care of the body.
One thing I usually like to do is dig into your past a little bit, just to understand who you are, where you came from. Tell me about your father, your mother, your upbringing. What was it like as Aaron Osgood growing up?
I grew up outside Seattle. My dad is an entrepreneur, started in office, like leasing space, and then figured out in 1995, that he could start like an online leasing company it was called officefinder.com. So that was kind of a shining light, right? I saw entrepreneurs in early on, and great upbringing. I have an older sister. Life in Seattle is great. Skiing in the winters, skiing on the lakes in summertime. Whole family's in the Northwest, and definitely a good sized family. So I had an awesome upbringing. I think I would say that I'm super blessed. I had the opportunities I was given. And my dad worked at home. Like I had the opportunity to like go play catch with him during the day. I kind of saw that from an early age. And I think it was from his upbringing. He didn't have a father, and his relationship with his dad was definitely more challenging. And I think what he took from that is, I'm not going to be that guy. I'm going to really be there for my kids. And he was 100%. And so that was really a huge priority for him. And I see just how important that is. Really great learning lesson.
Was that something that he verbalized to you growing up because of his not having a father? He wanted to spend more time with you, or is that something you just picked up yourself?
I don't think it was really verbalized. I think you could tell how much he enjoyed spending time with us. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't like, I wish I had this, so I'm going to do it for you. We all really understood, and there was a lot of pain behind not having the chance to spend a lot of time with your dad, or have a visit for a weekend, or just getting a birthday card. It's it. That was definitely really lucky to have him go through that process, so that he led the way for us.
For sure. And there's always somebody that changes the track in the family, hopefully for the good, right? And not towards the bad. However, the bad side happens as well. Everything can go great until somebody goes off the rails. But do you mind if I ask why your dad's dad wasn't there, why your grandfather wasn't around? Was it a divorce thing, or was it something else?
Yeah, I think he was a entrepreneur that really loved. He was a successful business, but he was a roller coaster ride type of guy, like business, lost a bit, that type of thing. Was a romantic guy, married 5 times. And I think it goes back even further, where he didn't really have a father growing up either. Instead of picking the route that my dad did, he went the same way. He didn't really have a dad. His dad was, so his story, the origin of my last name is unique. My great grandfather, Jack Neville, designed Pebble Beach, the golf course. He was one of the top U.S. amateur golfers in California, but he wasn't a good husband or father. That marriage to what? My grandfather, who we were just talking about, when he was growing up, he essentially had a stepfather. His name was Jim Osgood. And then my grandfather then went off to World War II. So he was a navigator in B-24 Liberators. And had a dark outlook on what he told us was like, he thought he was going to die. Mm-hmm. And to honor his stepfather, he changed his last name from Neville to Osgood, because he wanted to honor his stepfather for that. So it's an interesting transition of the last name from that standpoint. It is interesting how the whole idea of fatherhood really got passed down through those 4 generations.
But there's a lot. I want to stay on that for a little while, because that's really interesting to get into. So your grandfather's stepdad was Jim Osgood, right? So your grandfather goes to war, comes back, turns into an entrepreneur, and then has 5 different wives. I'm trying to track down some of this, because there's a pattern that obviously gets broken with your dad, it seems, in one way, shape, or form. Being a combat veteran and seeing a lot of combat veterans and seeing a lot of military divorces and people ending up with 5 different wives type of thing, I'm trying to see if there's a pattern in that thought process. From the conversations you've had with your dad, do you know how much of that may have come from the fact that, hey, he thought he was going to die, so now it's like everything just turns into an adventure? Or do you think it was something else?
I think that could definitely be part of it. My grandfather was bold and not afraid to talk to people. He loved going to parties. He loved just being in the center of it all. And I think he really did have a zest of life. Like he really wanted to enjoy it. And that could definitely be a part of it. Yeah. Like there were missions where he called out sick, or like he couldn't go on the mission. And of course, that's the day that the plane went missing. And it's those moments the understanding the fragility of life afterwards is like, I'm just going to ride high the whole time and do whatever is most enjoyable to me. That's really where I think kind of how he lived his life. He didn't really say he spent everything. His lifestyle was, I'm going to enjoy it to the best of my ability.
I'm 41, married. I have 3 kids. I was born in the States in Los Angeles when I was 9. A friend of my dad died in a car crash. My parents said, life is too short. They packed us up, me and my brother, and we went on a trip around the world. First stop was Israel. My dad's Israeli, my mom's American, but actually my mom wanted to stay there, and we just stayed there. And so my mom told my dad, "You wherever you want to raise my kids here." And so I've been in Israel most of my life. Served in the Navy for 6 years, the Israeli Navy. And then after Navy, went to school, studied law and business, and founded a startup about 12 years ago in the crazy diamond and jewelry industry. We did 3D imagery for diamonds, hardware, software, photographing diamonds for trading purposes, had operation in all the diamond exchanges around the world, and create a standard for how to photograph, analyze, and trade polished diamonds online. And sold that company 8 years ago to an e-commerce website. Stayed on for a few years to scale that. And then 2018, me and my co-founder left, traveled with our families, did like a 3-month trip. My co-founders, we're good friends, wives are friends, kids are the same ages. Iterated business ideas for a few years. 3 years ago, founded a new company to manage our stuff, our finances, turned into a new startup, which is called Visor, which is what we do today, which is basically a wealth management startup.
Awesome. I want to rewind a little bit to go back to almost to the beginning. You moved to Israel, but tell me what it was like growing up with your dad, especially your dad and your mom, but you're focusing on the dad side of the house. Obviously, there was some things he dealt with that led to you traveling around, but what was it like growing up? What kind of life were you living before and after the move to Israel?
I was born in Santa Monica, Los Angeles. My dad served in the U.S. military, then some part of Social Secret Service. And during that time, he met my mom. A lot of Israelis have this dream to move to, a lot of immigrants to move to the U.S. and make it and build it here. And then he met my mom and they settled down. He started a business in the U.S., which was going pretty good. And we were really involved in that. I remember as a kid, and I was really involved. Like my parents would involve us in these things that were happening. I remember my dad sold emergency kits, small bags with equipment, direct to consumers. And there was this huge earthquake in Los Angeles. I remember that as a kid.
Yeah.
And then we did these, it took us, me and my brother, and we do pictures with this emergency kit, like next to demolished houses, whatever. So I remember being involved in that as a kid. And always, I think both my parents are like these risk takers, out of the box approach to life. Always been driven, believing I was capable of doing whatever we put our mind to. High moral standards as a kid, integrity and honesty above most. I remember a lot together with my parents a lot. Obviously, when we moved to Israel, it changed because we moved that the objective wasn't to move. At least I don't think that was the objective unless my mom had this hidden agenda of to move us to Israel. During those first years, my dad was back and forth to the U.S. for business and back to Israel. And so those first few years from the dad-child relationship, he was gone a lot, but I don't remember that affecting much of the relationship. A lot with my mom, which isn't a bad thing. Was we had a good childhood. We didn't grow up wealthy, but not poor. We were classic middle class.
I don't know. You had enough money to jump and go gallivanting across for however long and move to a different country. That's solid.
At that point, Israel wasn't expensive. Now Israel is extremely expensive. I remember when the friend of my parents died in that car crash, they decided to pack us up. Our life is too short. We need to experience it together. And the idea was to homeschool us for a year. Found herself in Israel and didn't go back.
Okay. You mentioned your dad was in the U.S. military, right?
No, my dad's Israeli. He was in the U.S.
Israeli military.
Israeli Secret Service. And
okay.
The Israeli consulate in Los Angeles where he met my mom, who was...
okay. Now it's coming together. So I was wondering when he moved to America. So he was still working for the Israeli government in L.A. when he met your mom. Gotcha. So that clears that up. How old were you when you moved to Israel?
I was 9. My brother was 7.
9 and 7. Okay. What did you think the difference between, okay, I'm in Santa Monica and now I'm in Israel? How did that feel for you as a 9-year-old?
Dude, I hated my parents. We didn't know Hebrew. I remember being socially well-positioned in elementary school. Moving to Israel, I was shy, not speaking with anyone, complete follower. It was difficult. That first year was extremely hard. My brother got beat up as a kid. It was a harsh experience. My mom says when we moved in the US, we had television with endless channels, and crime in LA was at the level where I'd be feared going out at night because I'd be killed for my Nike or Reebok pumps. And in Israel, visiting my dad's parents, during the first week, I was taking a bus alone. I was 9 years old.
Yeah.
And there was only 2 channels on TV. It was just like a different mentality. My mom loved that simplicity and freedom. And I think that's the key motivator for their decision to move to Israel.
Do you get the sense your parents had any talks about that? Or your dad probably talked about Israel and was able to share all of that with your mom, that maybe that created some of that desire to move there until she saw it in person?
Hell no. My dad did not want to move to Israel. He had a good life in the US. Like many immigrants, it's easy to make money, build a business. You have space. Israel, it's hard. It's a constant grind. The best comparison is New York, but on a country level. Fast, aggressive. My mom was in Israel as a child. She was 16. She visited Israel. She loved it. My mom tells they were in Israel at Jaffa and the old city of Tel Aviv on the beach. My dad, listen, I want to raise my kids here. We're going to stay here. Eventually, he understood that it was, looking back, I love the life in Israel. Growing up in Israel was amazing. My parents divorced when I was 24. My mom now lives in Europe. She doesn't live in Israel. I think Israel is the mentality is very high paced, very direct conversations. There's no like hypocrisy. If someone thinks something, they're just telling it to you in your face. They're not going to be nice because they need to be nice. And so there's a level of naivety in the US that is very hard in this country, especially at the older age. My mom was 36 when we moved to Israel. It's hard. Language barrier, culture barrier. I've seen Americans move to Israel. An Israeli guy marries an American woman, convinces her to move to Israel, and it's hard for her to adapt to the culture, and it doesn't work. I don't think she regrets it. It developed to a place where I don't know if she imagined it to be that way. Okay. Also the fact 3 boys in Israel, mandatory military service, 3 boys getting into combat units, that's scary for a mother. Knowing that she's the reason, if God forbid something would have happened to me and my brothers, she would have blamed herself. But I think also my parents have a lot of courage even to make that move, especially my mom to initiate that. It's now as a parent in Israel, thinking about moving to the States, you need balls to make that call. It's like relocate everything, buy friends, buy everything, buy what you used to, start fresh at an older age. Extremely difficult decision.
Clay Speakman, married 26 years to an amazing woman, 4 kids, 3 by birth, 1 by foster, ages 25 down to 19. My wife and I are navigating the newly found empty house syndrome, a scary and wonderful place. Being a father has been the most challenging, rewarding, frustrating thing in my life. I don't think any father would argue otherwise. And if you do, then you just weren't in the game enough, because being in the game is like constant chaos and heartbreak and betrayal and love and affection. And it's just overwhelming. I love being a father. I built businesses most of my career because my goal was to not have a normal job. That's the only thing I knew as a 20-year-old kid. And so I've been able to build businesses. I've had people support my dreams, and that's been amazing. Built an entertainment company, built a tech company, and recently had a situation where I had to decide what I want to do next. And I decided to pursue my passion of helping people find grit, helping people overcome the comfort crisis that is all too easy to fall into. And I'm really having a good time helping business leaders find their grit, superpower, and to change their worlds.
That is awesome. I would love to turn this into a selfish session and have you take over my comfort crisis that I'm currently in. But we'll see how the conversation goes. I want to rewind and chat about Clay growing up. What was it like for you growing up? Tell us about your parents and how it was for you growing up.
Grew up in a typical good household, parents who were together, had discretionary income, lived in a good neighborhood, good schools. My parents lost a child before I was born, and I don't have a lot of childhood memories, but I do know my parents were probably trying to shelter the risk in my life a good bit, because having lost a kid already. But as a kid, I just wanted to go do crazy things. I just wanted to be on my own and go do my things. And when I grew up out of that, I always wanted to do crazy things. I always wanted to push the limits, push the boundaries, be reckless, things like that. And I had to balance that with being responsible, being safe, which was just not very high on my chart. But then I grew up idolizing the military and the fastest jets and the biggest warships and things like that. But I had this feeling inside that I could never do that. I was not strong enough. I didn't have what it takes. I was scared of being a strong man. And so I dealt with that a lot, and I wasn't able to be a strong dad. I had that limiting beliefs. I wasn't strong inside. I was weak. And I had to figure that out. And I spent about 10 years from when I was like 30 to 40, sort of testing myself, challenging myself, going to pretty far extremes, trying to see if I really had strength inside. And that's where I got my internal grit. I did the depth race, 100 Spartan races, 12 ultra marathons, and a snowshoe marathon, and multi-day survival events, and saw people almost die, saw people actually die and be revived next to me because I had to push to figure out if I was strong enough. And I had to go to the extremes. But that's what defines me today. It changed my relationship as a father with my kids in a lot of ways, and I'd love to get into that when the appropriate time, but I did see it change in that arc with my kids. The difference between having to do something and getting to do something is the approach and mindset. People would ask, why would you do that stuff? And it's because I get to do that stuff. The same thing with kids. You get to be their father. Nobody else gets to be heartbroken, betrayed. You get that, and it's going to suck. Instead of running away from it, embrace it. The more you put into it, the harder it's going to hurt. But nothing good comes out of sitting on the sideline.
When you mentioned that it was like, I think you implied you didn't feel sheltered from danger growing up. Did I hear that right?
I have nothing but positive feelings from my childhood. Only when going back and reflecting on the situation in hindsight, does it offer any sort of roadmap to how we end up as adults? Everybody can go in psychotherapy about what went on when they were 2, 3, 5, 7 years old that they don't even remember that. But for me, I think my parents did the best they knew how to do in the situation they were in. It shapes who we are. As adults, we have to deal with all that. Deal with it productively or deal with it destructively. We have a choice. And we're not victims. We have to choose to be the heroes in our own story. We can't just be the victims at somebody else's. But the default for most people that I meet, they just want to blame everybody else and blame everything else for where they're at. That's the victim. As a parent, you can't be a victim. You got to be the hero. Own your decisions, your situation, and get in the dirty stuff with your kids. You got to do that in business. And that's just what I try to do, is focus on how to be in control of the things I can. And the rest of it is just there to shape the challenges that I've got to overcome.